Thanks again for having me. I'm from the Leeds School of Business. There's a picture of our beautiful school up on the Boulder campus on a summer day. It's a great place to work, and it's great to live in Colorado. So we came together last spring and formed a consortium. It includes 2 chambers and a policy group. It includes the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, the Denver South Economic Development Partnership, and the Common Sense Policy Roundtable. And the whole idea behind this consortium is to take a look at policy issues that impact the Colorado economy. We're not an energy group per se. We don't focus all of our attention on energy. This study happens to be on energy. I have worked on energy projects the past 4 or 5 years, so I understand the oil and gas industry very well in Colorado and how it intersects with the Colorado economy. Our center at the Leeds School of Business does a lot of other studies as well. We do forecasts of the Colorado economy. We do a study for RTD that forecasts revenues. We've taken a look at everything from manufacturing to the natural products industry. And right now we're starting a study of the renewable portfolio standard in Colorado, taking a look at it over the past 10 years. So we're by no means focused on oil and gas, but this has been a good project for us to work on the past couple of years. So why are we doing this study? And it's really to inform stakeholders in Colorado about the economic issue. Oil and gas is a substantial contributor to the Colorado economy. And as you'll see in a few moments, we point to some of the economic consequences if there were some sort of statewide fracking ban. And I think that should be part of the discussion, that you can make these decisions, but there are trade-offs when you make these kinds of decisions that constrict not only oil and gas, but really constrict activity in any industry. So just to start, when we do these kinds of studies, it can bring people out of the woodwork that start asking questions of why are you doing this? Should you be taking a look at oil and gas? Who's funding you? And so I put this slide up here because this is a map. You can go onto the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission website and pull up this map and put in your address or your work address, and you can see oil and gas activity around Colorado. I put this up here because that X marks my house up in Erie, Colorado, on the eastern fringe of Boulder County. And I show this because I live in really the epicenter of much of this activity. And this active oil and gas well is a little further than a stone's throw from my house. But Troy Tulowitzki could hit a baseball past that well. That's how close it is. And when I drive to work, I pass all of these producing wells. So I'm not insulated from the industry, and so it's very much a part of my community, and it's very much a part of our economy. And so that's what I want to share with you today. So this all started for me last fall. The consortium was sitting around talking about the next big issue that we should study. And it was just after the election, and 4 more cities in Colorado passed fracking moratoriums. We saw Boulder, Broomfield, Fort Collins, and Lafayette voters pass these moratoriums. The year prior, we saw Longmont pass a fracking ban, which is distinctly different than a moratorium. And so the thought at the time was, what's likely to come next? And so we decided to take a look at a fracking ban that's statewide. There's this momentum building within the industry. So that's the approach that we took. And we started to gather data. And as January and February came around, we start to see some of these initiatives boil up. And the reality is that these initiatives are taking 2 paths. One of them is a local control measure. And this basically says that communities in Colorado have a right to decide if they want to have oil and gas activity or not. Right now, the State Attorney General's office says that it's not a right of local communities to decide this. The other path is increasing the setbacks in Colorado. So right now, oil and gas activity the drilling has to set back about 500 feet from structures, including homes and schools and hospitals. The proposals include increasing setbacks to between 1,500 feet and half a mile. So if you think about a half-mile setback from these various structures around Colorado, that really has a real constriction on the potential activity for oil and gas development within the state. So what was our conclusion? A statewide moratorium on hydraulic fracturing would result in economic drag on the Colorado economy. So this shouldn't really be a shocker, right? So if we constrict production and reduce the number of jobs in the state and the wages in the state and the taxes in the state, it's going to have some sort of negative impact on the Colorado economy. And so I think that should be intuitive to us all. But this paper talks about the magnitude of it, and it compares it to some other activities within the state. I think a really important backdrop to this is to talk about the industry and to understand the industry, and a lot of these assumptions went into the REMI model. So Colorado is very much an energy-producing state. We're 9th in terms of coal production. We're 6th in natural gas production. We're 8th in crude oil production. And depending on which stat you look at from the Energy Information Administration, we're 27th in renewable energy. So oil, gas, and coal are our primary energy product in the state. And oil and gas represent 75% of our energy portfolio. So when we talk about energy in Colorado, we are by and large talking about oil and gas. In terms of GDP, wages, and employment, I zoom out to the mining industry because when you take a look at these statistics from federal agencies or from state agencies, there's a lag factor. So right now we can take a look at GDP for Colorado for 2012 at these higher industry levels. So I can look at mining. This summer we'll be able to look at oil and gas for Colorado for 2013, but those statistics aren't out yet. So when we take a look at GDP, the mining industry represents about 3.7%, okay? When we take a look at historical information, oil and gas represents about 80 to 83% of the mining industry. So when I talk about mining, I'm really talking about oil and gas. The industry represents about 2.7% of total wages in the state and 1.3% of Colorado total employment. But what's kind of fascinating is if you take a look at GDP per employee for the mining industry and wages per employee in the mining industry, it's more than twice the average for all industries within the state of Colorado. So it's a high output and a high wage industry within our state. The industry pays wages only second to our company headquarters within Colorado. Management of companies and enterprises really represents our state's company headquarters, and mining is only second to that industry. When we take a look at occupations, this is from some national data, but the oil and gas industry is really this compilation of field workers, as I call them, the construction and extraction workers, production workers, maintenance and repair workers, as well as a bunch of office jobs. So 60% of the workers are in these field activities, and 40% are in more of the office-style jobs. So these are a lot of accountants, they are the finance individuals, the executives, the managers, the engineers. And that's why, when I show you some later slides, that's why you'll see that the employment impact is really pervasive across Colorado. It doesn't just reside in the areas where a lot of production exists. But this industry has performed very well in Colorado over the past decade and a half or so. We indexed employment starting back in 2000, and while Colorado went through these two terrible employment recessions that took about 5 years each to recoup peak employment, the mining industry has really skyrocketed. So all industries in Colorado total employment has grown about 12% from 2000 to 2014. When you take a look at the mining industry, it's grown 2.6 times. There's a steep drop off here. Right about here is when the recession started nationally. And commodity prices took until about maybe August of 2008 before the prices just fell out of the bottom. So it wasn't limited to oil and gas, but we saw cattle prices fall, corn, wheat, molybdenum, what have you. All commodity prices took a pretty steep dive, and that impacted oil and gas activity within the state. So there's this deep dive in employment, but it started to rebound faster than the state of Colorado. So this is a similar slide taking a look at employment growth in Colorado from the peak. So this is about April or May of 2008. The state started to lose jobs. Took about 5 years before we reached peak employment, which was just a few months ago. And now we're building new jobs. We're about 2% above our previous peak. So we're at these record high levels for Colorado total employment. When you take a look at mining employment, it peaked, fell pretty hard in percentage terms, but it was one of the first industries to start to recoup job losses from the recession. And now it's up 12% from that previous peak. So when we look at mining employment, we're talking about high growth on a small base of jobs. And when we take a look at Colorado total employment, we're looking at relatively small growth on a large base of jobs. But Colorado's a fortunate place nationally. We were third fastest growing state in terms of employment in 2013. Moody's projects us to be fifth fastest in 2014 and third fastest in 2015. We were one of the first states to recoup our employment losses from the recession. And in fact, as far as building this new peak, there's only 4 states that have done better than Colorado in terms of recouping their job losses. Texas, Alaska, Utah, and North Dakota. So there's something that all of those states have in common, and it's really robust energy sectors. When we take a look at metropolitan statistical areas within Colorado, if you take a look from the Denver metro region, north up to Fort Collins, and east over to the Greeley MSA, or Weld County, that part of the state has outperformed the rest of Colorado, and Colorado has outperformed the nation. So if you take a look back over the past 5 or 6 years at the diversity of the Colorado economy, which we often tout, the diversity of our economy has made us stronger. But what's one component of change that has happened in that part of the state over the past decade that's really a game changer? And if you take a look at permit activity up in Weld County, up in the DJ Basin, this is that component of change. There's always been some level of oil and gas drilling activity up there, but it really started to take off around 2006, 2007, 2008. And in fact, it fell a little bit during the recession, but it's right back up there. I think they had their second best year last year. When you take a look out west to places like Grand Junction, you might think, well, they've got a pretty robust energy sector. Why aren't they benefiting from all of this? And I'm speculating a little bit, but I think one difference that you can see, or 2 differences, is that it's an older industry out there. So they didn't see a big change in their permitting activity over time. It was already a built-up industry versus a relatively new industry in northeastern Colorado. And they're primarily gas out there. And if you watch gas prices over the past 10 years or so, we're at very low gas prices right now, which has happened to benefit the state of Colorado. Colorado is 48th in terms of natural gas prices nationally. And I think 2 states don't report. So we basically have the lowest gas prices in the nation, which helps out heavy industry in Colorado. We don't have the lowest electricity prices, but with Xcel's conversion from coal-fired power plants to gas-fired power plants, and this inclusion of Colorado's gas as an electricity resource, we do benefit from the low gas prices in the state. The Greeley MSA, if you take a look at their February employment growth number, they were third nationally out of all metropolitan statistical areas. So Greeley was one of the fastest growing MSAs in the nation. And over the past 5 years, I believe they were 8th fastest growing. So this is a map of Colorado oil and gas production activity. The green counties represent the 5 largest oil and gas producers in the state. These 5 counties represent 87% of Colorado oil and gas production. Weld County is the single largest oil producer and the 2nd largest gas producer in the state. Garfield County is the largest gas producer in Colorado. So we have this concentration of production in 5 counties. The 31 other blue counties represent the other 13% of production in the state. And then you've got all of these counties that effectively have 0 production. So 28 counties with 0 production. When you take a look at the employment impacts, the impacts are much broader. Employment is much more dispersed across the state. The same 5 counties that I described at the beginning, and in very rough numbers, about 1/3 of employment resides in those top 5 producing counties. Another 1/3 of the employment resides in the 31 low-producing counties, and roughly 1/3 of employment resides in the non-producing counties. And in fact, Denver proper has one of the largest numbers of oil and gas workers in the state, over 6,000 workers. And so why is that? We have all of this corporate activity that's centered down in Denver, occupying Denver real estate, but they've got the field workers up in Weld or out in Garfield actually executing on these various plans. The industry has a pretty robust tax revenue stream associated with it. I point out here severance taxes in Colorado. This is a 12-month rolling sum. So if you take a look at the last 12 months ending in February 2014, the sum of severance taxes is about $210, $209 million. And this revenue stream goes to a couple different areas in the state. First, they split it 50-50, and 1/2 goes to the state's natural resources and mining group for operations, and a large chunk of that also goes into the state trust fund. But 1/2 of that pool goes back to our local communities. So of the 1/2 that goes back to the local communities, a portion of that is in the form of these statutory payments that go to communities where the oil and gas workers live. So these oil and gas companies report where their workers live, and the state remits checks to those communities. The other part of that bucket goes to local communities through a grant program. So communities that are impacted by oil and gas can say, you know, we have a lot of truck activity that's coming through our community from oil and gas, and it's wearing down our roads and bridges. Can we get a little bit of help to resurface these roads? And the state will approve some of these grants. Over the past couple years, if you take a look at those remittances, I think in 2011 and 2012, they haven't been doing as many grants, but that money is building up for the state to spend. In terms of other revenue streams, property taxes is perhaps the largest payment that comes from the oil and gas industry. We estimate the taxes to be about $675 million just in property taxes in 2012. And if you think about property taxes in Colorado, we don't have a state property tax. We have local property taxes. And it really goes into 4 buckets. It goes into cities, counties, school districts, and special districts. But school districts represent the majority of this, more than half of this if you take a look at mill levies across the state. So $675 million in total property taxes, more than half of this goes directly to schools. But the other revenue streams that I often talk about, there's a Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission tax that really funds the COGCC. If activity occurs on public lands, state or federal lands, there's land leases, there's bonus payments that the companies pay in order to lease that property. This industry, like any other industry, pays income taxes and they pay sales taxes. So when you stack up all of these revenue streams, we estimate it to be between $1 and $1.3 billion that stays nested within the state of Colorado in any given year. So I mentioned we've done economic impact studies on the industry over the past few years. I like working on this topic because it's very much an accounting exercise. This data exists out there, so it just takes knowing where it is to pull all of these pieces together. In our reports, we source everything. So you can go out there and take a look at employment numbers for the industry or tax numbers for the industry. It's probably one of the most well-documented industries to study. But when we've done, this is based on 2012 data. This last study that we did, this is taking a look at upstream and midstream employment, by and large. You can argue that a few additional things should be in here. But we calculated 32,000 employees directly working in this industry in the state of Colorado. And those employees are earning about $3.2 billion in wages. Okay? If you zoom out a little bit to include further downstream activities, so this would be some of the refining activities in the state, gasoline stations, wholesalers, that number increases to almost 50,000 workers earning $3.7 billion. The reason why I show you both of these is because when we're studying the industry, we're really interested in this view, the upstream and midstream. Because if there's some sort of statewide fracking ban, you wouldn't expect gasoline stations to go away or gasoline wholesalers to go away. But I think you could make a very educated argument that extraction would go away, drilling would go away, the support activities, perhaps much of the pipeline activities, at least take it from the wellheads to a centralized location. And some would argue that some of the refining activity would go away. We've got refineries that are close to this oil and gas supply chain, and they're able to convert that into some sort of usable product, so we wouldn't need as many refineries. But that's our assessment of the size of the industry. When we talk about the multiplier effect of this industry, whatever industry you work in, you're buying goods and services from other companies. And you're buying other goods and services from companies within Colorado. And that's what we try and describe with the multiplier effect. So you can calculate how industries interact with each other, and industries have different multiplier effects. So if you take a look at the retail trade industry as an example, retailers are buying goods primarily from other companies that are maybe outside the state of Colorado or outside the country, and they're shipping them to Colorado by rail or by truck. Those arrive at the storefronts, they stock the stores, and then you have relatively low-wage employees compared to the Colorado average that are selling those goods. So there's kind of a comparatively small multiplier effect when you think about retail trade. Retail is important for many reasons. One of those reasons is it's a conduit for retail sales tax that really fund our government. Sales and income taxes are the two biggest funders to Colorado General Fund, for instance. But when you take a look at an industry like oil and gas, or mining, or manufacturing, or logging, those industries have a much broader supply chain, much more intensive supply chain locally. So that multiplier, instead of being 1.5 or 2, it might be 2.5 or 3. So when we take a look at 47,000 direct industry employees in Colorado, that supports a total of 119,000 employees within Colorado and helps support $7.8 billion in total wages and 31 billion in output within the state. So all of this is really a backdrop to our study. And a lot of these are variables that we put into our study. It's important for us to understand the industry and how it interacts with the economy. So when we started studying this fracking ban, it's not necessarily as simple as saying, well, we have all of this production today, there's a fracking ban, so we have no production tomorrow. Instead, what we said is, we have all of this production and new activity today. If there's a fracking ban, we would expect new production to almost dry up tomorrow. So what's important when analyzing this is we would have all of these existing wells that have legacy production in the state. So all of the wells that are already tapped, they're still going to produce oil and they're still going to produce gas. But they produce less gas in the second year than the first year, and less gas and oil in the third year than the second year. So these are things that we had to take into consideration. So we pulled down data from the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, taking a look at individual wells over time. We worked with an individual from Allura Energy to take a look at the population of wells from 1970 to current to understand how the depletion curve looks for oil and how it looks for gas. So I put up here the oil production slide, and it starts in 1970. Here we're building production levels, and then we take a look at how they deplete after the first 5 years, actually after year one even. And so all of these lines are cumulative production on a logarithmic scale. So what's really nice about this is we can even take a look at this current decade and see how we're building oil production. And then we can make this assumption, if we turn off new production, how will that be spent out over time? And you can go to the paper and look at what the same curve looks like for gas. And another assumption that we made is that if you were to turn off the ability to hydraulically fracture wells, would there still be production? So we talked to industry, and industry tells us that there would effectively be no production in the state of Colorado. But without having a real way to verify whether they would or wouldn't still participate, we just took a look at the existing population of wells. And the estimate is that about 95% of wells in Colorado have been fracked. So our assumption is that if there's a fracking ban, 95% of new production would go away, and we'd have 5% of new production still occurring. So we applied these depletion rates to 95% of the wells in Colorado. And in the first year, oil depletion rates, it loses about 40% of production. In the second year, it's about 27%. But that curve gets shallower over time. Until year 16 and 17, it's about just shy of 7%. The gas depletion is not as steep, but it's equally important. It's about 14% in the first couple years and about 8.2% in the trailing years. So there's a point with these wells where production would get to be so little that it's not even cost effective to operate them anymore, and they would just turn them off. They would cap the wells. So we put this into our REMI model that we calibrated for the Colorado. It's built for the Colorado economy. We further calibrate it with Colorado population numbers from the state demography office and with the most current employment numbers that we have. But the REMI model has this baseline forecast for growth based on historical data about Colorado economic growth. And what we're able to do is shock the model with some sort of component of change. And in this scenario, that component of change is a fracking ban that reduces Colorado production. And what we found is that Colorado would expect to lose about 68,000 jobs, so these are direct and indirect jobs, on average in the first 5 years. So what that means is we're on this trajectory of growth, and that employment line is now shifted down by an average of 68,000 jobs over the first 5 years and 93,000 jobs over the long view between 2015 and 2040. So this represents about 2.2% of employment, taking a look at the long view. In terms of GDP, we estimate about $8 billion in GDP lost over the first 5 years on average, and $12 billion lost on average, or 2.6% of GDP over that long view. So a couple of clarifying points. We study what we know about the industry. We know employment, we know wages, we know taxes, we know production, and we know the dispersion of activity around the state. There are a lot of things that we don't know. We admit that we don't know them about the industry. These are environmental impacts, air quality, water quality, noise pollution. And the question is, what value would you put on these topics? And these are being studied right now. The EPA is supposed to be releasing a study very soon on water quality impacts. The University of Colorado is participating with the School of Mines and 7 or 8 other institutions to study these comprehensive impacts of air and water quality. Colorado State University is also participating in studying these activities. So it's being looked at, but I think it would be really haphazard for us to assign an arbitrary price to these things before they're fully understood. So this represents, these numbers are built on the foundation of what we know about how the oil and gas industry interacts with the Colorado economy. So as we move forward, and as I close, I just want to tell you that these local control initiatives and the setback rules, I think the setback rules were going through title board hearings today. So we should have a little bit more information about what's likely to end up on the ballot this fall. And our group wants to be reactive to the actual ballot language that takes shape, because I do think we're a source of information to stakeholders within Colorado. And so we're going to model this again. We're planning on modeling a setback rule and a local control rule. But I can tell you just intuitively that these will have varying degrees of impact. So, we modeled kind of this worst case scenario, as Tom Clark from the Metro Denver EDC puts it. If you take a look at a local control measure, just anticipating how this could impact the Colorado economy. The communities that have banned this are in densely populated urban areas. And it appears that that's where a lot of the grassroots discussion about the industry is coming from. So I think a rational decision maker would look at it and say, if there's this local control ballot initiative and it passes, the areas within Colorado that are really benefiting the most from the industry are probably the least likely to ban fracking. So Weld County probably wouldn't ban fracking. Garfield County probably would not ban fracking. The Northeast counties in general wouldn't ban fracking. But perhaps these metropolitan areas do, from Fort Collins down to Pueblo, including the Denver metro region. Or maybe cities in general say, we don't want this activity near our schools and our businesses. So I just took a look at production numbers. And if you take a look at production within city limits within Colorado, only about 4.5% of production happens within cities. If you take a look at production within metropolitan statistical areas along the Front Range in Colorado, where most of our population lives, from Fort Collins down to Pueblo, including the Denver metro region, but excluding Weld County, that's where about 1.5% of our production occurs. So, relating this study and extrapolating it to those scenarios, you might think it has a relatively small impact on the Colorado economy. And that may be. But one thing that we didn't mention or didn't study is the signal that it sends these companies. Remember, Denver proper is one of the largest beneficiaries of oil and gas employment, as well as even reaching down to the Douglas County area. There's a lot of oil and gas workers. So, one thing we haven't studied, but one question is, how would that shift the landscape? Would these companies move out of this area? And that's not something I can answer. If you take a look at the setback rules, I think it's likely that the setback rules will match up closer with what we've presented here, because when you start to draw lines from a structure out a half a mile, you start to really restrict the potential for oil and gas development. Because, I mean, how far do you have to go before you reach a house or a school or a business? So we'll see, what comes out of Title Board, and there's a level of ambiguity in the way the initiative was written. But as we see it written as a ballot measure, I think we'll have enough information to model these things out.